Good morning. Welcome to the Crafty Canary, and this is your tip on Tuesday. I am about to give you the long-awaited chicken broth in the crock pot video. So I made my vegetable broth video about a month ago and put it on my Facebook page, and I've had many requests for the chicken broth video, so here it is. I just cooked a whole chicken in the crock pot today. So that I can use the meat in a casserole. So I took the meat off the bones, and I have all the bones right here, plus a bag full that I've been saving in the freezer of chickens that I've made, or rotisserie chickens that we have eaten from the store and not, gnawed on the bones. We cut the meat off the bones. So I've been saving these since January 11th of this year in the freezer. So we're gonna put all those in. I have a lot today, so I'm not sure we're gonna get a whole lot of broth in here, a whole lot of water, but sometimes when I do this, and today might be one of those days, they don't like to come out of the bag when it's really full, so I have to either really pull or sometimes even cut the bag, but I didn't have to cut it today. So I'll put these new ones in, kind of in the crevices. And then I'm also going to add one celery stalk that I have chopped into 3 pieces, one carrot that I've chopped into 3 pieces, and I did not peel the carrot. I washed it and scrubbed it with my little vegetable brush, but I did not peel it. I leave the peel on, and remember, we're gonna filter everything through a sieve and with cheesecloth at the end, so we don't really even need to worry about that. We might even get some extra nutrients from that peel. So I leave it on, saves some work. An onion, a small onion, large dice, and again, I rinsed it off and I took kind of the outer peel off, but I did not peel it. I did not take the ends off, and I'm just gonna put it in like that. Then 3 garlic cloves, smashed, and I'll kind of show you what I mean by smash. So I've got a garlic clove, make sure you can see, and I'm gonna take the side of my knife and just lay it flat on that garlic clove and press and just crush it. So when your recipe says a crushed garlic, that's what you do. A tablespoon of peppercorns and 2 bay leaves. My hands are kind of dirty, so I don't want to stick them in there, but we'll be okay. All right, I should have gotten those out earlier. 1 and 2. There we go. And now I'm going to pour my water on. I've got about 8 cups here. We'll see how much fits in there with all of that chicken, all of those bones. Now I have pretty carefully picked these clean and tried to get most of the meat, skin, fat, all of that off. Use the meat, of course, throw the skin and the fat away. But that way you have more of a bone broth. You have, genuinely bones that you're cooking instead of meat. And that gives you that real great nutrient from the bone. So I'll put a little more water in here when I get off camera because it's not quite full. I want it almost to the top of the crock pot. I'm gonna put my lid on, turn it on, and it is 8 o'clock. I'm gonna go to bed, and in the morning, I will turn off the crock pot and cool it. So I will see you in the morning to finish it out. So it's the next morning, and here's what our chicken broth looks like in the slow cooker. You can tell that it's been cooking all night, cooked for about 12 hours, and everything is nice and done. So now let's strain it, strain all the solids out, and put it up for storage. So I'm ready to store my broth. It's been a great 12 hours of cooking overnight. I just left it on while I went to sleep and didn't have to do anything or manage it on the stove, and it's ready. But I have to separate all the solids from the liquid, and when I do that, I have some handy tools ready to go. So I take a big bowl and a big strainer, and I'm gonna put the big chunks of solids. So I'll get my tongs, and I'll get the bones and the big vegetables out, put those in there, and kind of let that drip and drain to use and store at the end. And then I'll ladle out the liquid into a measuring cup with another wire strainer with cheesecloth in it. And I'll get the spices and the smaller solids out that way and have just the broth. And then I also have my storage containers. I like to use these freezer containers. I have a lot of them, but all but this one are in use right now in the freezer with vegetable broth and chicken broth in them. So today I'm gonna have to be creative and use some other things as well. I have some plastic 1 cup storage containers, so I'll use those, but then I will also use some jars. And some people prefer to use the glass because you don't have the danger of the plastics. A lot of people are concerned about things seeping into their food. So some people really do prefer to use the glass. I don't, just because of the safety issue of the glass breaking. So what I have to do when I use glass is be very careful. I don't fill it all the way. And what I need to do is get an inch, not from the top, but actually from where the jar kind of curves and bends up. So I'll need to have my liquid no higher than about here. So with this big jar, I can probably fit 2 cups in. But if I have a smaller jar, especially if it has a good bend in it like this, I'll need to stop about right here. So I'll probably only be able to get 1 cup in this jar. And then another thing I do is make sure my broth is nice and cool before I put it in there, then cool it off even further before I put it in the fridge to cool another, to get cold and cool completely, and then I will put it in the freezer. As well, I'm not gonna tighten my jar completely before I put it in the freezer. I will just put the lid on and do, about like that. I'm not gonna really tighten it because then I have another risk of breakage in the freezer. As it expands with it that tight, it might break. So what I'll do is I'll do it, kind of not even finger tight, a little bit loose, put it in the freezer, and then when it's completely frozen, I'll go back and just tighten it finger tight. Okay, so let's get this separated. So I'll start with my tongs and taking out my big pieces. Okay, it's not all out, but most of the big chunks are, and I can kind of avoid those as I ladle it out. But if you can hear, there's a little bit dripping into that metal bowl, and it will continue to do that as I fill everything. And I'll have, maybe a good ½ a cup down in there that I can then strain into my cheesecloth and still use. So I want to try to get as much of that liquid out as I can. So now I'm going to ladle it into my measuring cup with my strainer. So I will take my ladle and carefully put it in there. And that cheesecloth is going to collect the peppercorns, little pieces of chicken that might have been in there, little pieces of bone that I might have missed, and it slowly drains, little pieces of onion. So I'm going to just ladle enough to be about 2 cups, let it slowly drain, and then I'll fill my plastic 2 cup container. So here's my plastic 2 cup container, and the fill line on this one is basically this edge right here. So I'm going to do it over this because these tend to drip a little bit. The measuring cups do if I go too fast, which I also tend to do. So I'm going to fill it carefully. Now, it is still pretty warm, so I am definitely going to need to leave these out to cool before I put them in the fridge or freezer. All right, so we have 2 cups of beautiful broth. Put that over here. And now I will get about a cup and fill that smaller jar and just let you see how I do that. Now I am going to pour this into a measuring cup so I get exactly a cup because I've gone over a little bit in that one, and I want to be more precise as I fill that glass jar. And I can label it and say 1 cup broth so that I know how much I've got. And as you'll notice, as I do this, I'm going to pull it up and show you. The pieces of onion and little pieces of chicken and peppercorns are beginning to collect in there, and it makes it slower and slower to get through with the more stuff that's in there. So I may need to get another piece of cheesecloth, throw this one away, and put a clean piece in there, just so that I'm not sitting here forever waiting for it to drain. And when I throw away the scraps from this, I'll double or triple bag them in plastic grocery bags, tie that up, and I'll wait till they cool really well. Tie that up and put that in the freezer, not to use again, but so that it doesn't stink up my trash can. So I'll put it in the freezer. That's a trick I learned from my parents. When you have stinky trash and the trash isn't coming, for another 5 or 6 days, put it in a plastic bag, bag it several times, wrap it up really good, and put it in the freezer, and then you don't have stinkiness in your trash cans or in your kitchen or your garage or anywhere. And just remember when the trash comes that day to put it into your big trash can and roll it out, and then you don't have to deal with the stinkiness. So I have a cup here of broth, and I'm gonna pour it into my smaller jar. Hoping, here, let's do it over the crock pot so we don't make a mess, because I do tend to do that. Hoping that I'm right, that this is gonna only be about 1 inch from the bend of the jar, and I am, yay. So you see, I'm not gonna fill that all the way up or even 1 inch from here. I'm gonna try to be 1 inch from where that jar starts to break up and curve. All right, I'm gonna let that cool for sure before I put the lid on it and before I put it in the fridge to cool even further. All right, so like I say, I'm gonna keep filling containers with this, then label them, and I just use masking tape and a Sharpie, and I write chicken broth, how much it is, 1 cup, 2 cups, and the date. And that way, when it's in the freezer, I know how fresh it is when it was made and what it is, because like I say, I have vegetable broth as well, and sometimes the colors are pretty similar, so I want to make sure I'm getting the right one. And I want to talk a little bit about the difference between broth, bone broth, and stock. And I'm not an expert on it, but I've done a little bit of research. And if you know better, if you're a chef or a culinary expert, please help me out here if I'm wrong. Definitely comment in the comments and let me know what you think. But chicken broth, basically, is like what I made yesterday when I cooked a whole chicken. And a lot of, I added some water to the chicken in the crock pot. A lot of juices dripped off. I did strain that and put it in the refrigerator as chicken broth. Now, it was cooked with the meat on the bone, and so it's not going to have as much of the cartilage and everything from the bones and the nutrients that it gets from the bones with all that meat on it. So it's going to be a little more liquidy. It's going to not be as nutritious. It's still going to be good for you and healthy and flavorful in your recipes. But then when you cook like we've done with this, you get as much of the meat off the bones as you can and cook it mostly bone, then you have bone broth. And from what I understand from my research on the internet, bone broth is kind of what they're now calling stock. So chicken broth is made with more meat. Stock is made with just bones and wanting to get that gelatinous. So even from the fridge, when I take the chicken broth that I've made from the bones, when I take it out of the fridge, if it's not frozen, it's just refrigerated, it's almost like meat jello. I know that sounds kind of gross, but it's very gelatinous, very viscous, I think is the right word. And it's because it has those nutrients from the bones, and it is much more healthy for your skin and hair and nails, and that's also more flavorful, oddly enough, and maybe because we use the peppercorns and the onion and garlic, but it is much more flavorful in dishes. And my husband has used it as just lunch. He's just had the broth for lunch, and he was doing that for a while to be more healthy and to lose some weight. And he would take what I had made from the freezer and heat it up in the microwave or on the stove and eat it for lunch. And then when we ran out, he used one of the box kind, and he said that the one from the freezer, the one that I made, was so much better. And not because I'm a great chef, because I'm not, but just because it's fresh, it's really made from those bones. We know what the ingredients are, and they're all real ingredients. I got a box out because I have some boxes from the store of chicken broth and read the ingredients, and even the organic kind has cornstarch, has sugar, has words that you can't pronounce. So I know what's in this, and I know that it's relatively healthy, and that makes me feel so much better. Now, of course, it does take time, and it is more convenient to buy a box. And if that's what you have to do at your stage in life, then that is okay. And I've certainly done it. I have boxes in my pantry right now. But when I can, I love to make this and to know that my family is having really healthy broth when I make a soup, or when I add it to casseroles and recipes, or even when my husband eats it for lunch just by itself. So that's really my reason for doing it. And again, if that's not where you are in life and you don't have time, that is okay. Just buy the healthiest that you can. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Again, put any comments or questions that you have down in the comments or on my Facebook page at facebook.com/craftycanary. And I'm so glad you joined us today, and I'll see you next week.